So before we, so we're going to take a quick picture of everyone. So if you can come off, if you've turned your camera off, please turn it on if you feel comfortable. And we're going to take a group photo. And my colleague Charlotte will do that here in a second.
Jason, can you stop sharing your screen so we can change it to gallery view?
Yes.
All right, I'm just going to take a quick screenshot of everyone. Got it.
Thank you. Okay, everyone can see my screen back to where we were before. Great. So thanks so much again for joining us today for the Alumni PDE live orientation. We're excited to have you all here for us to have the opportunity to engage as a full cohort for the 2024 Alumni PDE. So to start us off, please share in the chat how you're feeling about starting the PDE on the 22nd. You can share emojis if you'd like, or GIFs, or just with words. Okay, good. Thank you, Ellie, for feeling very excited. We're excited too. Looking forward to it. Great. Excited and nervous. Great. I bet you're nervous because you want to do a good job. I know that feeling. Happy to be here. Awesome. Thank you. So as you know, by now you should have all completed the orientation module on Canvas. So while some of the material we go over today will reinforce what's in the module, that's on Canvas, the module itself goes over essential information that's not included in today's session. Therefore, please do complete the asynchronous module in Canvas. It's mandatory, and do it as soon as possible since the PDE starts in under 10 days now. So to start us off, we're going to do a few introductions. So my name is Kason Kirby. I'm a program officer at IREX. I work specifically on the professional development experiences component of the fellowship. We're joined today by two of my colleagues. I'll let Riley Walsh introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Riley. I'm a program associate on the IREX's PDE team, and I'm supporting Kason. Nice to meet all of you, and looking forward to working with you during the PDE.
Thank you, Riley. And my colleague, Charlotte Renfield Miller, who took our photo, is the manager for community engagement on the fellowship team. So that's the IREX team joining us today. And we also have some colleagues from the U.S. Department of State here as well. And I'd like them to introduce themselves now.
Hi, Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining from. My name is Natalie Spencer. I am a program officer with the U.S. Department of State working on the Mandela Washington Fellowship, and I have the pleasure of working with Kaysen and Riley and Charlotte throughout the year on PDEs, and just really excited to see you all here, to know that you're still interested and engaged with what the fellowship has to offer, and that you'll be sharing your experience and expertise with some really great organizations this spring. So just really grateful for all of you, and we hope that this experience is as valuable for you as we know it will be for the organizations that you're working with. We know that you have, your own professional commitments, family commitments, all kinds of other things going on. So we love to know that you are setting aside this time to make those new connections and continued engagements with U.S. organizations with us here in the United States. So thank you all. And with that, I will send it over to my colleague, Jumana, who's also on the call.
Hello, everyone, and Happy New Year to all of you. My name is Jumana Kamal, and I work with the Department of State, and I focus primarily on the Leadership Institutes. But I'm here to learn more about the PDEs and see you all. So yes, good luck to you all. It's a great, exciting opportunity, and I can't wait to see what you all do with it. Thanks. Back to you, Kaysen.
Thank you. So we're really happy that we have our colleagues from the State Department with us today. And so therefore, we'll go ahead and get started with an overview of what we'll cover today. So we're going to talk about working with U.S. organizations. We'll talk about cohort engagement, how we'll hope you as a cohort will be engaging with each other throughout the PDE. And as you know, the very important work plan, we'll talk more in depth about that. So we're going to have a discussion here. You may have already had experience working virtually. What are some tips that you have for working virtually? Some of you may have participated in the fellowship in 2021 when we had the virtual version of the fellowship. Some of you may have had previous roles with organizations working virtually. So for those of us who may not have worked virtually before, what do you have? What are some tips you have for those who may not have worked remotely before? You can share your answers in the chat, or if you have a quick comment, you can even come off mute.
Can I come on here?
Sure, please. Introduce
Okay.
yourself.
Hello everyone. I'm Fleuro. I'm from Madagascar, and I am a fellow alumni of 2019. I was in Boise State University, and I am in the public management track. Right. After my IMWF in 2019, I had the opportunity to work with an American about the reciprocal exchange program, and it was during the COVID-19 in 2021. So we had to make it virtually, and we worked with students and with the American. We didn't have that much challenges, apart from sometimes the network was a challenge in Madagascar, but apart from that, it was fine. And also, currently, I am still working with some teachers in the US, as I am a teacher, and we work together virtually as well, almost every week.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for joining us, Fleuro. And we've got some tips in the chat, pre-scheduling meetings at least 2 days prior. That's great. Since you're not seeing colleagues in the office, it does take some forethought to scheduling live meetings, especially, as you know, with the time difference, those considerations as well. Make sure you have stable internet as much as possible. Please do that. However, we'll discuss later on in the presentation how you can come up with contingency plans with your host supervisors if you lose internet. We know that happens frequently for some of you. Communicate with the supervisor prior to the meetings in order to prepare in time. Exactly. Great. So it looks like we're echoing some of the same tips here. So thank you for sharing those. Now we're going to have a participation poll. Since we're talking about virtual communication, you've been introduced to your host organizations already. Maybe not all of you have had your placement confirmed yet. That's because we're still trying to get the last paperwork finalized with your host organizations, but all of you have been introduced to your host organizations. Just want to know, since your introductory call with your host organizations, how many calls have you had with them since that introductory call? And please go ahead and vote in the participation poll now. So even if you haven't had your placement confirmed, that's okay. You can still participate in this poll. Mariama, I see you're asking, how do you vote? The poll should have appeared as a pop-up window on your screen. So maybe see if you have another browser window that's hidden so that you can vote. It's looking like we've got really good responses here. A couple of you have had several calls. It looks like everyone's had at least one check-in call, so that's great. Really happy to see that you're staying engaged with your hosts. That's what we really hope happens once we introduce you to them leading up to the start date. So if some of you have only had one check-in call, but it hasn't been so recent, please try to get another call scheduled with them before the start date if possible, since there is one more week before January 22nd. So as we've kind of touched on already, please be aware of the time differences as much as possible. When we introduced you to your host organization, we let you know about the time difference between your country and where they're located. If ever you're unsure about the time difference, you can Google where the time differences, since times can change depending on where you are. Riley was going to put a link in the chat. You can use a website called timeanddate.com to set up a clock to remind you of what the time is in your host's time zone. And you can check with your PDE host on their typical work hours, just so that you know that you won't accidentally call them or contact them outside of their working hours. We want to make sure we're respectful of the host organization's time. So make sure that you are aware of those working hours. Please discuss with your host their preferred and your preferred methods of communications. You know this is included in your work plan, the first part of your work plan, which was due earlier this week on Monday. So if you've not discussed your preferred methods of communication yet, please go ahead and do that before the PDE starts. You also want to respond to emails, and maybe if you're communicating over WhatsApp, you want to respond to those emails or messages in a timely manner. So within your own designated working hours and by requested deadlines, be respecting timely manner in responding to messages. However, the PDE is only 10 to 15 hours per week during the 6 weeks. So don't feel like you need to be doing more than that to stay on top of all your communication with your hosts. And then just more on setting expectations about communication. Are you going to be sending messages outside of your 10 to 15 hours per week, outside of live check-ins? Plan for one live check-in each week. Do your best to have a live check-in with your host or a secondary host supervisor or someone else at the organization you'll work with at least once per week. And something we touched on in the chat already is thinking about what are contingency plans for when the internet goes out? How are you going to stay engaged if that happens? And then also remember to refer to what you've set out in the work plan for backup methods of communication. So for call etiquette, we recommend you use headphones with a microphone if possible, and keep your microphones muted on calls where you're not speaking with others in case there's background noise. Please select a background without visual distractions. Select a professional headshot when your video is off. Consider using a virtual background that the fellowship provides. Riley's going to put a link in the chat where you can download the fellowship branded background for virtual calls. And if it's a norm at your host organization to wear professional attire on virtual calls, please, abide by those norms. If you're unsure about what the norms are for virtual communication, start discussing that with your host now if you haven't already. If you do prefer to have your camera off during meetings, or if you have a slow connection, let your supervisor know and just have a conversation about that. And if possible, have a professional photo displayed in its place if you're turning your camera off. So we encourage you to be as proactive as possible, especially in the virtual environment. Americans expect their employees and colleagues to be proactive and communicate constantly. Fellows should feel free to ask questions, clarify what their supervisors mean, and be open if they are facing challenges with work. Americans can be very direct when asking questions, and they value efficiency and clear, honest answers. At all times, be respectful of your colleagues. You're a representative of the Mandela Washington Fellowship and your PDE host. So your conduct will reflect on the fellowship and the institution you're working for. Punctuality is very important in U.S. organizations. Fellows are expected to log in to meetings on time. If you think that you will be late to or absent from a meeting due to illness or another emergency, you need to discuss this with your host supervisor as early as possible. Then also, when using mobile devices in meetings for anything other than taking notes is strongly discouraged. So your personal phone or tablet, don't accept any personal phone calls or send text messages or update social media during meetings unless it's something urgent. So for workplace culture and communication, let's first talk about diversity. So working with U.S. organizations, you will encounter many forms of diversity, including racial, ethnic, religious, socioeconomic, political, and sexual diversity. The U.S. values diversity and protects against identity-based discrimination in the workplace by law. U.S. law prohibits discrimination based on age, disability, national origin, pregnancy, race, color, religion, and sex. Many U.S. states also prohibit discrimination based on sexual orientation. When working with your host or connecting with other fellows and members of the fellowship community, you should never use derogatory language, name calling, racial slurs, or other language that someone could find offensive. Additionally, many employers have internal policies that may be stricter than U.S. law on discrimination in that state or city. Please review and be familiar with your host institution's diversity policies. When it comes to gender relations, in the United States, people enjoy equal opportunity and equal protection from harassment under the law and in practice even in a virtual setting. All fellows are expected to behave respectfully toward all other fellows, PDE host organization staff, and other partners. U.S. citizens commonly form friendships with no expectation of sexual or romantic relations. Honesty and clear communication can prevent confusion about the level of intimacy and expectations in a relationship. Sexual harassment means making sexual advances toward a person from whom you do not have consent. The United States takes sexual harassment very seriously, both in face-to-face and virtual contexts. Online or virtual sexual harassment can occur over email, text message, or other electronic forms. Examples include making sexual jokes, repeatedly messaging someone without response, repeatedly commenting on someone's gender or appearance, or sending pornographic images to someone. If someone tells you that your behavior makes them uncomfortable, you must stop the behavior immediately. If someone else's behavior makes you uncomfortable, please tell your supervisor or contact our team at IREX. Keep in mind that sexual harassment in the United States is determined by the perception of the person on the receiving end of speech or an action, not by the intention of the other person. Harassing speech or behavior toward any individual, sexually or otherwise, may be grounds for termination from the Mandela Washington Fellowship and the PDE. If you have questions about what might constitute sexual harassment, or if you feel you have been a victim of sexual harassment during the program, please contact your host supervisor or an IREX representative immediately. Now let's talk about email etiquette. Respond to emails in a timely manner. In the US, try to acknowledge someone's email within 1 or 2 business days. However, you should try to read all emails the same day you receive them because you don't want to miss something important. Emails are not the same as text messages. Write emails in complete sentences while avoiding the use of slang words or unnecessary abbreviations. Do not use colorful or fancy fonts. Keep your emails as direct and concise as possible. If you feel that email is not helping you understand or explain something well, then simply offer to go on a Zoom call with the person. Keep paragraphs concise and focused. Subject lines should always be relevant. Create a professional email signature. Always proofread and double check your writing. Now for plagiarism. Just as with US universities, plagiarism is taken very seriously in US workplaces. All fellows are expected to do their own work, and misrepresenting someone else's work as your own is strictly forbidden. If given any type of writing assignment or project, fellows are expected to document and cite all sources. Plagiarism may result in your PDE host deciding to end your PDE early. Plagiarism means to use another person's writing or materials without crediting the source. To present as new and original an idea or product derived from an existing source. To steal or pass off the ideas or words of another as one's own. For more information on plagiarism, go to plagiarism.org. You may be asked to sign agreements promising not to use, share, or circulate proprietary organizational information outside of your PDE, called non-disclosure or confidentiality agreements. US organizations take this very seriously. You should also expect that materials, documents that you create during your PDE will be proprietary to your PDE host. This means that your host will own the product, not you. Finally, with the advent of ChatGPT and other AI tools, you should ask your host supervisor about your host organization's policies and preferences regarding these tools if you hope to use them in your own work. So for the PDE terms and conditions that you signed, you're encouraged to review them again to ensure that you're aware of all the rules that fellows must follow during the PDE. And by signing this document, each of you has agreed to abide by the PDE's policies. Although we know that you will take your responsibilities seriously, we want to take a few moments to review the steps that will be taken if you do not follow these policies set forth in the terms and conditions you have signed. For minor policy infractions, the first step is a verbal warning via a phone call from IREX. Examples of behavior that may warrant a verbal warning include excessive or repeated tardiness to or absence from meetings, late deliverables or non-completion of work assignments, or disrespectful behavior toward your PDE host. A second minor infraction will result in a written warning, which is also signed by the fellow. Examples of behavior that might warrant a written warning are repeated and unexplained absences or continued disrespectful actions. Please note that a single violation may result in an immediate written warning if it is deemed to be serious. After multiple minor policy infractions, or in the case of a single severe violation of policies, IREX staff can make a recommendation for termination of an individual's PDE to the U.S. Department of State. Again, we do not anticipate any issues, but we want you to be aware of the possible consequences of inappropriate behavior. So we're going to have a discussion question in the chat, and please respond in the chat. What are some guidelines fellows follow to be successful in their workplaces at home? Please, if you have any thoughts on some policies that you're already, abiding by with your organizations or companies or departments that you're working at home, please share some of those in the chat. Okay, email policies, good. Anti-discrimination policy, good. Sexuality. It seems like many of these policies are similar in the US. Okay, anti-corruption policies, yes. DE&I policies. Equity and inclusion policies, wonderful. So you are all pretty familiar with this, with these kind of employer protocols and expectations. Thank you for sharing in the chat. Well, when you start your PDE, depending on your host organization, you may have a meeting with human resources staff at your host organization. The purpose of that meeting to review employer protocol, complete any paperwork that the employer requires, like a non-disclosure or confidentiality agreement, and discuss your role within the institution. It is imperative that you thoroughly study and abide by all rules and regulations listed in your company's handbook and policies for employee conduct. If you violate any of your employer's rules and regulations, this may be grounds for termination of your PDE. When it comes to fundraising, U.S. workplaces can be sensitive about working through their contacts for outside fundraising. For example, if you meet contacts through your PDE and then in your personal time, reach out to those contacts to tell them about your funding needs in your home country or home organization, this could be a problem for your host employer. If you would like to reach out to contacts that you gain through your PDE, you should speak to your host supervisor about this in advance. Additionally, Americans typically do not respond well to people they do not know well asking them for money. You should develop relationships and then follow up about other opportunities later. As you may know, U.S. workplaces can have a flat organizational structure and everyone is expected to do administrative work, regardless of gender or of the importance of your position level. In many of your home offices, you may have someone to organize documents, track event RSVPs, etc. This is not often the case in the US. IREX has informed your host that you should be doing no more than 10% administrative work during your PDE, but you should expect to do some, as everyone does in the US. Now we're going to have another participation part of the presentation. So you're going to see some scenarios pop up on your screen, but please only participate one at a time. For our first scenario, you're working with an organization that is holding a large conference in February. You've been helping design the sessions and content, and you'll even be speaking at the conference. The week before the conference, you're surprised and somewhat offended when your supervisor asks you to track RSVPs and organize attendance lists. You have a high-level position at home, and you typically expect administrative staff to do your work. You get angry and complain. Is this acceptable or unacceptable behavior? Wonderful. Unacceptable. Thank you all for participating. Unacceptable. So if you can speak to if someone might could speak to off mute, what you might could have done instead of getting angry.
Well, this is Flero. For my experience, I think I need to follow up the activities I have done before. If it might also be from my organization that has made it like that. So I should rather make a follow-up and evaluation, and find solutions.
Thank you. Yes, you want to maybe talk with your supervisor before to clarify what expectations are during the PDE. Well in advance. The time is now to really be talking with your host supervisors about any kind of expectations related to upcoming tasks that may be related to administrative work. Just so that it's clear and it's not surprising. So we do have the poll questions on the screen, and we'll get to those in a moment. There's just one more point that I want to make about non-disclosure agreements. So some employers may require you to sign a non-disclosure agreement or NDA or another form of binding personal conduct agreements on your first day. I think some of you have been signing these already. The HR department of your PDE host will explain the document clearly and be able to answer any questions that you might have about it. Don't worry though, this is a common document that many employees in the US are required to sign. NDAs are an agreement between you and the employer stating that you will not share company secrets or information with non-employees. These are legal documents, and it's very important to read it through carefully and fully understand and follow them. Not all of you will have to sign these documents, but some of you will if you haven't already. So as some of you can see you've got the acceptable or unacceptable scenarios, and let's go ahead and start going through those one by one to get more in detail and discuss about potential scenarios that could come up during your PDE. So we'll go with the first one now. You're having trouble logging into Zoom and realize you're going to be late to your meeting. You figure you'll get there eventually, so there's no need to notify anyone. Is this acceptable or unacceptable? And I think I'm seeing in the chat someone says they can't see the pop-up voting space. Once again, this may you may have pop-ups disabled on your computer. The pop-up voting screen may be hidden in another browser window. But in any case, feel free to participate in the chat if you think this is unacceptable or acceptable. You're logging into Zoom and you realize that you're going to be late to your meeting, but you don't notify anyone. So I think we've only got, so far, only five or six people have participated. If you're not able to see the voting screen, the participation screen, please feel free to answer in the chat. And if someone can maybe quickly, very briefly come off mute to explain why this would be unacceptable behavior, because this is considered unacceptable.
Hello.
Hello, please introduce yourself.
Oh, thank you so much. Hassan, I'm Khalid from Lesotho.
Thank you.
All right. So that is highly unacceptable because communication is very important. You can't just let someone wait for you and then feel like they already know that you're coming, and then at the same time you don't even show up. Communication is very important. You need to communicate all the time. If you don't communicate, that means someone won't be aware that you're not coming to them or you're not going to communicate with them. So we need to communicate all the time. That's very important. Thank you.
Thank you. You're exactly right. And, you know, being mindful of your host supervisors and your host organization's time, letting them know, keeping them updated, you know, that's very respectful behavior. Even if you're running late, it's more important to keep them in the loop than not. Next, we have, and let's go through these one by one. I see many have voted already, but we're going to go through one by one. You're working on a project independently when it's 11 p.m. in the US. You have a question and decide to call your boss to ask a question. Is this acceptable or unacceptable behavior? Contacting your boss when it's 11 p.m. in the US and you have a question. And someone can briefly come off and maybe explain. I see someone voted that it's acceptable.
Hello, this is Sam. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah,
Please
I
introduce
think
yourself.
Yes, it's Sam Kikaro from Tanzania. I think it is unacceptable because it's late, you know, it's 11 p.m. They might be asleep unless you discussed with your host that you are free to call anytime, but really 11 p.m. is late, so it's unacceptable.
Thank you. I see someone in the chat has asked, is there a reason we're going through the orientation? So the purpose of today's session is to reinforce what you have already covered on Canvas. And we're going to get to more participatory parts of orientation later on, but we want to reinforce a lot of the material. So please stick with us because there are parts of today's orientation that will be new and are new. Next, we've got, you haven't heard from your host supervisor in 2 days about a question you asked and are getting impatient. You send an email with the subject line, "Hey, where have you been?" in all capital letters. The email is the same as the subject line. Please, can someone come off and tell us what you think about this one? It looks like we got 100% unacceptable.
Well, for me, it's always required to be polite firstly. So there must be reasons why the host hasn't responded to the question. So it's for me, it's good to wait, and if you do so, you have to be polite and you have to behave well. That's why of saying hey will not be that polite enough. Thank you.
Yes, yes, and also it's important to remember to stay formal and friendly, in professional emails. So we don't think it's good to write in all capital letters. Um, in this kind of context, it's not really acceptable. So, use complete sentences when talking to your host supervisors. Do a clear subject line, a greeting and a signature, and be sure to proofread your emails to make sure that they sound the way you want it to, and even read back over emails before sending, just to be really, really sure that that's the tone you're wanting to convey. And obviously, emails are not the same as text messages. Next, you have a project that's due tomorrow, but you're feeling unwell and won't be able to complete it on time. You email your supervisor to let them know. Is this acceptable or unacceptable? Looks like we've got 100% acceptable. Would someone like to briefly tell us your thoughts on this?
Hello,
Hello.
can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Who is speaking?
Yeah, thank you, Casey. So for me, the underlying reason is something you do not have control over, since you are incapacitated at that moment and wouldn't be able to complete the work. So for you to have reached out is something that is commendable. So that is why I think it's acceptable, because you are not in a capacity to do the work and you have also communicated for them to be aware. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, you want to keep your supervisors in the loop as much as possible. And you want to let them know, even if you're thinking, oh, I'm over communicating, still go ahead and do it. They're going to appreciate you keeping them in the loop. Next, we've got, you're trying to build up seed funding for your NGO and bring it up in a team meeting. Is this unacceptable or acceptable? I see we have some voting acceptable, or a couple voting acceptable, and almost everyone else voting unacceptable. So maybe we can hear from both opinions on this one. If anyone voted acceptable and would like to share.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, this is Sam Rawit from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. I voted unacceptable because it's a personal project that you're bringing in another work setting. So your supervisor or your colleagues may find this not appropriate, since you are discussing about the institution that you're working at the moment. And since this is your personal project, it may not be appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. That's generally what we're wanting, to think. That's how we're wanting you to think about this one. It's generally unacceptable. However, we've heard, from fellows previously during PDE orientations that share that it could be acceptable. And it is true, if you've previously, discussed with your host supervisors that this would be acceptable, maybe you have a plan in place that a particular meeting, the purpose of it is for you to share about your own organization and find potential funders. In that case, it would be acceptable only if it's something that you had, previously discussed and agreed on with your host supervisors. So at this point, do we have any questions on the material that we've covered up to this point before moving on? Thank you all for your participation. If no questions at this point, we can keep moving on.
question. Sorry, Kasan.
Yes.
Yeah, you mentioned about ChatGPT and other AI tools. Is that considered plagiarism or differently?
Sure. So we want you to think about ChatGPT in the same vein as plagiarism, so as something similar to it. Therefore, you discuss with your host supervisor on how they use AI tools, if at all, and what they might think of you using AI tools during the PDE. If they have plans in place and policies around it that allow you to use ChatGPT, then the fellowship, we think whatever the host organization approves of is great. So it's really just for something to you to keep in mind. You want to have that conversation with them if you haven't already. And someone else has their hand raised.
Yes, thank you. My name is Maria Makone from the Gambia. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Yes, so I just wanted to add on to the question about the ChatGPT. You did mention we would be required to sign some non-disclosure agreements, and there are some topics or projects that we would be working on that are quite sensitive. So I think we are not able to ensure the protection of these data that we would be using when we use AI tools. So I think it's much better for us to avoid using them, especially for those that are working on sensitive projects.
That makes sense. I think that's good food for thought for anyone who has to sign an NDA, to discuss with your host supervisor the ramifications of using AI tools when you've signed an NDA. So thank you for bringing that perspective up. Are there any other hands raised? I think I'm seeing that there's still some hand raised, but let me know if we can move on.
Can I?
Hello,
Hello? Can I?
please.
Okay. So my name is Andres Carvalho. I just have a question because it is something that I have heard in the asynchronous when I was doing a asynchronous course on Canvas. So there are a part that it says that whatever we do or whatever we any document, any kind of thing we do during the PDE is property of the PDE host. So I'm a bit confused because with my host we have agreed that we are going to work on some personal projects of mine, which will include doing some documents that probably he will have something to say about it. And what I want to understand is any documents that I do for my personal project, my personal development projects, are property of the PDE, or as it stated in the asynchronous course.
Thank you for your question. You're wanting to clarify the part of orientation where we said anything you create on behalf of your host organization would be proprietary. And that's true. If you're creating something for your host, that's something that they own. However, if you're working on something, related to your own company or organization, and your host organization is helping you develop that, I think then, it gets into a gray area, or it's just something that your host organization is wanting to help you with. And therefore, I think that's the distinction is, are you creating a product for your host organization? It would then be proprietary. But if it's something you're already doing and they're just helping you with, then I think if you're confused, then have a conversation with them or reach out to us directly and we can discuss in more detail. Thank you. I think we can move on. So now let's discuss about what cohort engagement will look like during the PDE. So there are a variety of ways in which you'll be able to network and engage with the full cohort of PDE fellows and hosts on Canvas. Please pay attention carefully. Some of these activities are required and you need to complete them each week. So first off, the Monday cafes, they're discussion boards in Canvas to connect with other fellows and share your experiences. Each Monday, IREX will post a Monday Cafe prompt that you're required to respond to by 11:59 p.m. the following Sunday. These topics will be both work-related and cultural, but should be easy to answer. So don't worry about sending in a lengthy response. The discussions will be available by 12 a.m. Eastern Time every Monday, and you can access them directly from the discussions section of Canvas. You will also receive a direct link in the weekly update email you'll receive each Monday around 8 a.m. Eastern Time. IREX will follow up with any fellow who misses a Monday Cafe submission each week. As you may know, we have a small group of PDE alumni who previously completed PDEs that will join us in the PDE course on Canvas, and we call them alumni ambassadors. They will serve as a support system and lead additional groups for networking. They will have a discussion board for you to ask them questions and will contribute to other relevant group discussions. Each focus group will have one alumni ambassador assigned to it. This leads us to the focus groups. So you're assigned to a group of 5 or 6 fellows in Canvas to support one another, share PDE experiences, and present on your work. Focus groups will have an optional PDE themed prompt each week, and they're encouraged to, in the focus groups, you're encouraged to connect with each other directly on Canvas or through another platform such as WhatsApp or Zoom to discuss each week's prompt. Each focus group should schedule at least one live meeting during the PDE to network and discuss how the PDE is going. And then we can discuss the work plan. I hope you all enjoyed your discussions with your breakout or your focus groups. And we're going to cover the second portion of the presentation today, the training today, and then we'll have another opportunity to ask questions at the end of this session. So thank you again for sticking with us. And we've got just a bit more material to go over. So we'll go ahead and get started. And it's about the all-important work plan. So, on this past Monday, January 8th, you should have turned in your top 5 strengths and communication methods to your host supervisor and IREX, along with your preliminary ideas for sections 3 through 7 of the work plan. The work plan is a space for you to include specific activities that you will complete, meetings you will have, seminars you will attend, follow-on project planning activities, and other elements. The work plan is a living document, so it will change over time, and that's a good thing. The work plan includes 8 sections in total: your strengths, communication methods, personal goals, professional development goals, workplace equity and inclusion, roles and responsibilities, your schedule, and a project and activity plan. Your response to each section should be at least 1 paragraph where appropriate, and your objectives, projects, and goals should be SMART: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Please work with your host supervisor to draft your 6-week work plan and send that next draft to IREX by January 31st. The last draft, the final draft, is due to IREX by February 28th. Please work with your host supervisor. Oh, excuse me, that was a repeated section there in my notes. We'll move on now to more about SMART goals. So your SMART goals should be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. if anyone might want to be thinking of some examples of some SMART personal goals and include them in the chat, that would be great. Some examples of some SMART goals include strengthen my knowledge of microfinance, enterprise structure, the U.S. credit scoring system, and how to engage my community at home and establish a successful microfinance enterprise to promote sustainable development. Another example of a SMART personal goal could be to gain a deeper understanding of nonprofit strategic management and how to develop a strategic plan for the NGO that I run in my home country. Increase my knowledge of human resource development and management and learn how to lead an effective and motivated team. If anyone would like to share some thoughts you have on SMART personal goals, please feel free to share those in the chat.
And hi there, Mr. Kirby. If I have a good resource on SMART Goal, can I share the link on the chat?
If you have a resource you'd like to share?
Yes.
Oh, you have a resource that you can share on how to come up with SMART goals?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I think that would be great if you'd like to share that in the chat for the others. Thank you. Okay, coming up with SMART goals on time management, work-life balance, sure. Thinking about these more in depth is important. So any that you might feel comfortable sharing in the chat, please go ahead and do that. Okay, here's a good one we can read. So Samrawit shared, my personal goals revolve around 3 key areas: improving my research skills, enhancing my academic writing abilities, and expanding my knowledge of nature-based solutions. I believe that acquiring these skills, I can significantly enhance my impact on urban development at a larger scale. Great. So obviously in the context of the PDE, you can't develop all relevant research skills or academic writing abilities perhaps, but maybe you can be very specific on those skills and tasks that you can develop, these personal goals. So thank you for sharing that. Any others someone would like to share in the chat before we move on to other sections of the work plan? Okay, well, it's something to think about. As you've already submitted your first draft of the work plan, this is something you can think about more. And thanks to Andre for sharing a resource for us in the chat. As you know, professional development goals are a part of the work plan. And in this section, you should list any professional development opportunities that you hope to take advantage of during your PDE. Professional development opportunities can include informational interviews, trainings, events, presentations that you will develop during your time with your host organization. Make sure these activities with your host supervisor that they're discussed ahead of time because they may have additional opportunities available after you start work. And some examples of SMART professional development goals include organize informational interviews with my host organization's leadership to gain insight into the organization's management style and how these professionals progress to this stage of their career. Attend a virtual session on best practices in health data management and new applications for these techniques. Participate in training opportunities, briefings, and other events where I can network virtually with my host organization staff and other experts in my field. As you've seen, there's a workplace equity and inclusion section in the work plan. So you should list what you hope to learn about practices of equity and inclusion in the workplace at your PDE host organization and how you might apply those to your own work. For the rough draft, you can include what you're interested in learning about equity and inclusion at your host organization. For the complete draft, due later, include specific practices that you hope to learn about and apply to your own work. We look forward to reading some of those. For the roles and responsibilities, you should list any projects, anticipated deliverables, and other assignments that are planned for your PDE. This can include both remote work as well as work you can perform in your local community. That would be beneficial for your host organization, such as data collection, partner outreach, or focus groups. You should include due dates that are incremental and final if you know them, and specific benchmarks or deliverables that you'll meet throughout these projects. Some SMART goals, thinking about that in this context is contribute to my host organization's annual report by writing sections on membership recruitment and development, conduct customer service study by interviewing current customers via email, analyzing their feedback and other data, and producing a report on my findings for my host organization. Another example is develop a comparison of supply chain methodologies and develop recommendations for process improvements in Nigeria and surrounding countries. For virtual engagement, in this section, you must make a plan with your host supervisor for which meetings and check-ins you will attend synchronously or live like we're doing today, and when you will conduct the rest of your work each week, maybe asynchronously or on your own time. While much of your PDE work will be done independently, you're required to have regular live meetings with your host supervisor at least once a week. Given the short time of the PDE and the time zone differences, you should plan the times of these meetings with your host supervisor well in advance. You should include the times of these live meetings in your work plan. These meetings are a great time to provide status updates on your projects, learn about new opportunities, and ask questions. The next section and the last section of the work plan is the project and activity plan. So this is what you submit at the very end of the PDE, along with the rest of the work plan you've worked on. You should include anticipated projects, deliverables, assignments, professional development opportunities, etc., that are planned for the PDE. Due dates and any benchmarks, deliverables should be included. And this part of the work plan should be a living document, so you can add through it as the PDE goes along. And this can be a useful tool when the PDEs are over and you have substantive items to add to your resume. If any of you have already some ideas of planned projects that you're going to be working on, would you mind maybe putting those in the chat or briefly coming off mute to share what maybe one planned project you have already in mind and discussed with your host supervisor? Share those in the chat, or maybe we can have one or two come off mute to share.
May I?
Okay, please, thank you.
Okay. So one project I have with my supervisor is business plan project, where we are gonna trying to make a business plan for my business or my business idea, which is in cybersecurity. And we are gonna try to apply all the strengths I have in order to create that business plan. And we are also gonna trying to have market research and analyze some data and do a business plan related to the country I live, which is Angola, and try to expand that business plan to other countries like Nigeria, but all focus on cybersecurity.
Thank you. That sounds great. So setting a business plan, and we've got in the chat, someone's goal is to learn about board setting and management, and someone else will conduct research on need assessments on menstrual health in Cameroon. Great. Collaborate on literature review article. Okay, Nestor, please come off mute.
Oh, good afternoon, everybody. My name is
Hello.
Nestor. I'm a Manila, Washington fellow from 2023, tracked in civic engagement in Florida, Gulf University. So I've been placed in Alumni PD at the Dent Education. The projects I will be working with called Futura, which is regarding to soft skills training and leadership development for adolescent and young people. Like, since we all have been in school, in university, we do a degree, sometimes we do a master, sometimes we do a PhD, depending on the people. But at the end of the day, you need certain type of skills and competency on your day-to-day life. So on your day-to-day life, you need soft skills. You need abilities that help you to deal with the situation that comes in and goes out. You need certain type of skills also to be more aware, to set your plan, to work with your project. So that's what we have been doing here. Since 2021, we have trained already 193 young people. So with Dent Education, I'm looking more to enhance and to improve the ability regarding to long-term planning, regarding to strategic thinking, and also to be more pragmatic, more systematic when it comes to plan, when it comes to your, let us say, to milestone settings, the way you will approach and things that you will do, in order to have more impact on the people. I think as a project manager, the main role is not just to implement the project, but to always figure out how can you improve the project in such a way that can increase the impact in the people that will benefit or that will experience the project they will be on. Since we work with training young people and adolescents, we aim in that way to contribute to development of the country. And our project itself attained 5 of the 17 SDGs goals, and also is a project that is strictly aligned with the sustainable plan of the government. So that's what we want to work with the Dent Education, which have similar approach because they work with young people in Baltimore as well. But regarding to the mindset shift and personal development and technical know-how, I think would be a great match to work with them, and I look forward to learn as much as I can.
Thank you. And I'm seeing other great goals and potential projects in the chat. Program development, teacher handbook for STEM education, designing marketing strategies. Thank you to everyone who shared. And hopefully your planned projects will become more, it'll become more set in stone or clearer as the PDE approaches or begins. And we look forward to reviewing your work plan. The next due date for that, we'll review all of your work plans and really look forward to seeing some of the projects that you've put in place and are working on. So at this point, let's move on to support and resources. So we're here to support you throughout. You've met your focus group, so don't hesitate to reach out to them as well to discuss how the PD is going, or maybe working styles with in the virtual environment, things of that nature. We hope you'll utilize your focus groups for those purposes. You've got your PDE handbook. This is something you can go back to and use throughout the PDE. And it should have most answers to your questions. And we know that you're balancing a lot by taking on this opportunity, the PDE. We know you're all working, and so throughout the 6 weeks, this could be a stressful time for you with personal commitments, work commitments, PDE commitments. So we've got the stress management and self-care resource guide on Canvas. We hope you'll use that resource. There'll be a virtual networking session for fellows and hosts as well during the halfway point of the PDE. It's called the Midpoint Mixer. So we hope at least one of you will attend that. We hope at least one fellow supervisor will attend that. It's going to be Tuesday, February 13th from noon to 1 p.m. Eastern time in the US. So if you're able to join us, that's great. If not, we hope your host supervisor will. So at this time, we'd like to open it up for Q&A. We're going to have some surveys that we'll send out to you during weeks 1 and 3 of the PDE for you to share feedback. We'll always be here, over email. If you'd like to have a call with us to discuss anything so that we can support you, please don't hesitate to reach out. So at this point, I'll open it up for questions. And I see we've got one in the chat already. And Floro is asking if we can send a copy of the focus group. So Floro, you've been assigned your focus group in Canvas. So you should be able to access your focus group there and see everyone who is in your group. Similarly, you have an alumni ambassador. They are going to reach out to you and organize a live session for you to join with each other, as well as discuss over WhatsApp. Would anyone like to come off mute and ask a question or put one in the chat?
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm Mahali from Lesotho.
Oh,
Can you
yes,
hear me?
please go ahead.
All right, all right. I'm kindly asking to provide sign language interpreting services for Tandiwe Maduma, because in the focus group, I tried to help her, but because I'm not very familiar with Zambian sign language, I could miss a few of her words. So I'm kindly asking if there will be a way for you to provide sign language interpretation services for her, because each country has its own sign language. So I'm very familiar with Lesotho sign language and South African sign language and a bit of American sign language, because Tandiwe and I and a few other fellows had an opportunity to go learn American Sign Language in Gallaudet University 2 weeks before the fellowship. But I'm just wondering if you could help her with a sign language interpreter, just so her information flows, because I tried to help the focus group, but I wasn't fully engaging, and I couldn't hear some of her signs because I'm not really familiar with her home sign language. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes, we're going to follow up with Tandiwe after this to clarify any interpretation needs for the PDE. Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome. Thank you.
Are there any questions anyone else would like to ask? Well, if there are no questions, a recording of the session will be provided on Canvas later. And we hope you'll go back to look at this, take a look at the slides. There's 1 week before, there's still another week before the start of the PDE. So if you haven't had a check-in call with your supervisor in maybe a few weeks, then please reach out and see if you can schedule one sometime next week, just to understand what your schedule might be the week of the 22nd. Otherwise, we've got one question in the chat from Patrick. If someone is attending an event in the US in the course of the PDE, is he allowed to visit the office of the host organization? Okay, I think, that's some coordination you'll need to do with your host. If you're going to be in the US already during the PDE for an event, do reach out to them to see if it's feasible for you to visit their office.
Sorry, Carson, I've got a quick statement. No, it's not a question. Please let our what do you call them? The former PDE, the ones who were there last year.
Alumni ambassadors?
Yes, please let our principal alumni ambassador know that we already have a WhatsApp group. And then if they could just send me their number, I can add them in it.
Sure thing. Oh, that'll be great. So once they reach out to you, I think that could be good to share with them, to let them know that you've got a WhatsApp group going among you already. So that's great. And we'll be sure to note that for them as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. Yeah, so as I was saying, there's still 1 week to go before the start of the PDE. Oh, it looks like Nestor may need to be added to that WhatsApp group, Colisile. So maybe you can connect directly with Nestor in the chat to share the link to that WhatsApp group that you already have among you. So really looking forward to hearing how your PDE goes, and do let us know if you have any questions before the start of the PDE on the 22nd. Thanks so much for joining us today. If you have questions, let us know over email. We'll be happy to discuss with you. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Have a wonderful weekend and great start to the PDE.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kaden.
Thank
Wonderful.
you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much, everyone.